My graduation party was supposed to be all smiles and congratulations, but instead, my dad dropped the secret that shattered our family. In front of my mom, siblings, and relatives, he exposed the truth that revealed years of parental favoritism and lies we never saw coming. What should have been a celebration turned into the most painful family drama we'd ever faced. So, at 22 and just graduated college, and my family threw a small party at my parents' house. Nothing fancy, just some food in the backyard, a rented tent, my gran in her favourite floral chair, and relatives buzzing around with plates of potato salad and barbecue. I should have been happy. Everyone kept saying, "Congrats, you made it," and all that. But the whole time, I had this knot in my stomach because with my family, things are never simple. See, my dad, Jerry 64, has always had this thing with favoritism. I've got two siblings, my older brother Mark 28 and my younger sister Emily 19. Growing up, it always felt like Mark was the golden child star athlete, got a car for his 18th birthday. My dad bragged about him to literally everyone. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one who studied too much, and Emily was the baby who could do no wrong. At first, I figured it was just normal family dynamics. But that favoritism shaped everything. Like, when I needed help paying for textbooks sophomore year, my dad told me to learn independence. But when Mark failed 2 classes in college, Dad bailed him out with no hesitation. So, at this graduation party, I kind of expected the usual, polite congratulations mixed with subtle digs about how Mark really paved the way or Emily's next, and she'll probably outshine us all. What I didn't expect was for my dad to get a little tipsy and completely unload a secret. It started harmless enough. People were giving little toasts. My mom 62 said something sweet about how proud she was of me. Mark did his whole bro speech where he mocked me for being a bookworm but ended it with, "Seriously though, proud of you, man." Everyone laughed, clinked glasses, good vibes all around. Then it was my dad's turn. He stood up, raised his beer, and said to my son, the first in our family to graduate college. I actually felt a lump in my throat because that was the first time he'd said something that openly supportive in public. But then he kept going. I know I haven't always been fair with my kids, truth is, there's something I need to get off my chest. The whole backyard went quiet. My mom shot him a look like, "Not now, Jerry." But he just waved her off. He went on, "The truth is I always saw Mark as my real legacy, but that wasn't fair, because Jerry Jr. isn't actually my only son. At first, I thought he was drunk and rambling. But then he looked me dead in the eyes and said, I kept a secret from all of you. I treated you differently, son, because you're not just the middle child, you're the one I wasn't supposed to have." Everyone froze. My grandma dropped her fork. My mom's face turned white, and my heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. That was the moment I realised this wasn't going to be just another awkward family dinner story. The silence after Dad's words was deafening. You could literally hear the neighbour's dog barking 2 houses down. Nobody knew what the hell to say. My mom just kept staring at him like she didn't recognise the man standing there. Finally, Emily broke it with her usual bluntness. "Wait, what do you mean by that? What do you mean Jerry wasn't supposed to exist?" Dad sighed, sat down in his lawn chair, and rubbed his face. "I should have told you years ago," he muttered. "But the truth is when your mom and I were having problems, He stopped, glanced at my mom, then continued, "I had a fling, and Jerry, you came out of that, but I raised you as my own because, well, you're my son." The world literally tilted under me. My stomach dropped like I'd just been pushed off a cliff. My dad had just admitted in front of my entire family that I was the product of his. My mom's face turned scarlet, and she slammed her glass down so hard it shattered. "You disgusting liar," she hissed. "In front of our children? At his graduation party?" I couldn't breathe. It felt like my whole identity cracked in half right there. I stood up, nearly knocking my chair over. "So what does that even mean? You're saying you've treated me differently all these years because I wasn't really yours?" My dad looked at me with this weird mix of guilt and relief. "I'm saying I didn't know how to handle it. Every time I looked at you, I was reminded of my mistake, but I still loved you, Jerry. I did my best." Emily shot up, eyes wide. "Your best? You basically ignored him his whole life while you spoiled Mark." And of course, Mark had to chime in, looking caught between shock and offensiveness. "Hold on, don't make this about me. I didn't ask to be the favourite." But Emily wasn't letting go. "Oh please, Mark, you've been Dad's golden boy forever, and you loved every second of it." "Stop!" I shouted, my voice breaking. "This isn't about who Dad liked better. This is about the fact that I've been lied to my entire life." The relatives started whispering. My aunt whispered to my uncle something like, "I knew something was off with Jerry's family," which made me want to scream. My grandma looked like she was about to faint. Mom finally stood, pointing at Dad. "You ruined everything. You ruined our marriage, our family, and now you've humiliated our son on the one day he deserved to feel celebrated." Dad tried to defend himself, raising his hands. I thought it was the right time to finally be honest. He's a man now. "Laugh?" I cut him off, trembling. "You don't get to use my graduation to unload your guilty conscience. You stole this moment from me." The emotions were boiling over, voices overlapping, people crying. And right then, I realised this party wasn't about me anymore, it was a battlefield, and I was standing in the middle of a war I never asked for. The backyard had turned into complete chaos. Plates of half-eaten food were abandoned, the music from the portable speaker was drowned out by yelling, and everyone was either crying, shouting, or glaring at Dad like he was some villain from a soap opera. I could feel my hands trembling as I tried to process everything. My dad had just confessed that I was the result of a fling and that he secretly favoured Mark for years. And my mom, she looked like she might actually explode. Emily, of course, wasn't holding back. "You've spent decades making it clear who your favourite is, Dad. You didn't even notice when I was miserable in high school, or when Jerry, she pointed at me and needed your help, and now you have the audacity to say you love me, loved him, please." Mark tried to step in, his usual conveneer cracking. "Hey, come on, Em, this isn't helping. Maybe Dad was just, I don't know, trying to protect him." I laughed bitterly, the sound coming out sharper than I intended. "Protect me? From what? From knowing the truth, from being treated like a second-class kid? That's not protection, Mark. That's favoritism. That's manipulation. That's lying for decades." Dad sank into his chair, his hands shaking. I never wanted it to be like this. I thought if I just loved you in my own way, it would be enough." "Enough?" I shouted. Enough, I spent my whole life feeling like I wasn't the kid you want. I graduated today, Dad, and instead of being proud, I feel like I'm standing in the ruins of our family. My mom finally shouted, her voice cutting through everything like glass. Jerry, you've dragged our children into this mess, and for what? Some trusted sense of honesty? This wasn't the time, this wasn't the place, and it certainly wasn't his day. Even the neighbours, who had been watching from their fences, probably heard the fight. Someone muttered, "What a mess," and I wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear. Emily wasn't done. You always had your favourites. Dad, Mark got everything. I got your attention when it suited you, and Jerry, you just kept him at arm's length because he reminded you of your mistakes, and now you want to apologise at his graduation like that makes everything okay. Dad's face crumpled. I didn't know how else to tell you. I thought this day was about closure. I felt a surge of anger and hurt that I didn't even know I could feel all at once. Closure? You don't get to hijack my achievement for your own redemption. You stole my day, Dad. You really did. Mark finally muttered something under his breath. I didn't know it was this bad, but nobody even looked at him. He'd been a favourite forever, but now it felt like the spotlight had shifted, and not in a good way. The party was officially over. People started drifting away, some awkwardly, some glaring at my dad like he was radioactive. Plates were still on tables, the grill was cold, and the air smelled faintly of burnt burgers and shattered family ties. I stood there, trembling, trying to process the fact that my graduation, the day I should have felt proud, was now the day I learned my entire family had secrets, favourites, and hidden resentments that none of us could ignore. I don't even know who was more hurt, me for losing the illusion of my family, or Dad for finally letting everything out. Either way, nothing would be the same. The next few minutes felt surreal. The backyard was a war zone of emotions, Mom pacing, Emily still yelling, Dad sitting silently with his head in his hands, and me trying to make sense of it all. I felt like I was outside myself, watching a nightmare unfold. Then Dad spoke again, his voice quite up as sharp. I want you to understand something. I didn't favour Mark because I loved him more. I thought I was protecting you, Jerry, protecting you from the truth about where you came from. I froze. My chest tightened. Protect me? From knowing I'm what? A mistake? A mistake that you couldn't even treat like a son? Mom's hands flew to her face. You call this protecting him? You've destroyed every ounce of trust in this family. Emily, not one to mince words, jabbed at him. And all this time, Jerry, you acted like Mark was your pride and joy. You missed my high school play, my first job interview, my everything, and you spent the whole time bragging about Mark, and now you want me to just forgive and forget. Dad flinched but didn't respond. He looked like a man unravelling in front of everyone, like the walls he'd built around himself for decades were collapsing. I took a deep breath, my hands still shaking. You didn't just favour Mark, you made me feel like I was lesser, like I didn't belong. And the worst part, you used me as a shield to cover your own shame. My mom, finally gathering some composure, stepped forward. All of this could have been handled privately. You didn't give him a chance to even process it before you spilled it in front of everyone. Dad's voice cracked. I was trying to be honest, for once. Well, I said, trying to steady my voice. Honesty doesn't get to ruin my achievements or humiliate me. You've taken my graduation, a day I've worked for years, and turned it into your confession. Mark, who had been mostly quiet, finally spoke. I didn't realise Dad ever did that. Jerry, I'm sorry, I didn't see what you went through. I blinked, surprised by him. Emily scoffed. Yeah, like an apology fixes decades of favoritism. Dad finally looked at me, eyes watery. Jerry, I know I failed you, I know I've hurt you, I can't undo the past, but I hope someday you can understand why I did what I did, and I hope you can forgive me. I wanted to scream, cry, run, and hug him all at once. I wanted to feel the pride I should have felt today, but instead, I just felt this enormous weight of betrayal and loss. I don't know if I can, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I need time, and I need this family to figure out how to actually be a family without secrets. Mom nodded slowly, still shaking. Emily crossed her arms, looking like she was evaluating whether this family was even worth saving. Mark just stared at the ground. For the first time in years, there was a kind of silence, heavy, uncomfortable, but honest. Everyone was forced to face the truth. The graduation party wasn't over, it had just transformed into something none of us expected. A reckoning. And that was the worst part. The celebration I'd dreamed of had become the day I realised my family's foundation had cracks I'd never noticed before and maybe never could fully repair. The days after the party were tense, to say the least. Nobody wanted to talk much, and the texts and calls from relatives were a mix of awkward sympathy and then a veiled judgment. Even Grandma, who usually tried to keep peace, barely looked at any of us without sighing heavily. Dad tried to reach out a couple of times, leaving voicemail after voicemail. Jerry, I just want to explain, or please, son, I never meant to hurt you, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. Every time my phone buzzed, I felt that same tight knot in my chest. Mom and I barely spoke more than necessary. When she did, it was always about logistics, returning a dish, picking up something from the store, but never about us, never about what had happened. Emily and I avoided each other too, even though we usually texted about stupid things. Mark, surprisingly, was the only one who tried to reach me. Hey, I know Dad messed up, he said over lunch one afternoon. But you can't let this ruin everything. You're my brother, and I don't want to lose you over this. I stared at him, fork halfway to my mouth. You don't get it. It's not just Dad. It's the way our family, our whole dynamic has been warped for years. I've always felt like I was second class. Mark looked down at his plate. I guess I never realised. Dad never made it obvious to me that he was favouring me. I just thought he liked things my way. I didn't know he was hurting you like that. I didn't know whether to be angry at him or grateful. Maybe both. It's not just about you, Mark. It's about all of us. Mom, Dad, even Emily. We've been walking on eggshells for years without realising why. Meanwhile, Dad tried a more personal approach. He asked me to meet him at the park near our house. I reluctantly agreed, more out of curiosity than forgiveness. He looked older somehow, weighed down by guilt. Jerry, he said, his voice shaking, I know I screwed up. I never wanted you to feel like you were less than anyone else. You're my son, and I love you. I swallowed hard. I know, but love isn't enough when it comes with years of neglect and favoritism. You can't just say it and expect everything to be okay. Dad nodded. I know, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to fix this. If you let me, I'll let you take the lead. It wasn't a perfect moment. Nothing about this was perfect, but it was honest. And maybe, just maybe, honesty could be the first step toward rebuilding what had been broken. Back at home, Emily started to soften too. She admitted she had felt invisible at times, even when Dad spoiled Mark, and that we'd all been competing for approval in ways that hurt everyone. It felt strange, painful, yes, but strangely freeing to finally put the raw truth on the table. The family wasn't whole yet. Far from it. But we were talking, finally, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like there might be a way forward. I didn't celebrate my graduation with laughter or cheers that day, but I celebrated something else, the first real conversation my family had had in years. And, for now, that had to be enough. The weeks following the graduation disaster were awkward, but slowly, small shifts started to happen. Dad tried, in his awkward way, to make up for lost time. He didn't overwhelm me with gifts or speeches, he just started showing up, genuinely, without the usual overbearing advice or comparisons to Mark. One Saturday, he invited me to help him in the garage. No lectures, no stories about Mark's achievements, just working on an old car. I noticed the effort, and I realised that maybe this was his way of saying, I want to be here for you, finally, in a way that matters. Mom also started softening. She wasn't openly forgiving Dad yet, but she was more careful not to escalate things. There were moments where she'd catch me staring, then give a small, understanding nod, like she was silently acknowledging the trauma we'd all shared and agreeing it wasn't entirely my burden to carry. Emily, of course, had her own approach. She stayed her blunt self, but started checking in on me more often. Look, she said one afternoon over iced tea, I know Dad screwed up, but we don't have to let him ruin everything. I mean, we're stuck with him, so might as well make him behave. I laughed. Yeah, the family legacy of chaos continues, huh? Exactly, she smirked. At least we're all in it together. Mark, surprisingly, became the quiet glue. He made small gestures, sending me links to articles he knew I'd like, asking my opinion about things, sometimes just listening without judgment. It was weirdly comforting to see him try, even if he didn't fully understand my pain. The real turning point came when Dad admitted he was going to therapy. He didn't tell us to show off, he told us because he wanted to understand why he had favoured Mark and why he'd struggled with honesty for so long. That admission alone softened something in me. Maybe he wasn't perfect, but he was trying. One evening, I found myself sitting on the porch with Dad, watching the sunset. The air was cool, the sky painted in streaks of orange and purple. He didn't speak for a long time, just sat beside me, and I realised that silence didn't have to be heavy. Finally, he said, Jerry, I can't change the past, but I want the future to be different. I want to be the dad you deserve. I nodded, swallowing hard. It's going to take time, Dad, a lot of time, but I want to try to. That moment felt like a small breakthrough, the kind that doesn't erase scars but starts to knit them together. For the first time, I felt like maybe our family could heal, even if slowly and imperfectly. Graduation had been a disaster, yes, but the fallout had forced truths out into the open. It hurt like hell, but in a strange way, it also freed us. Freed us to start dealing with real issues instead of hiding behind appearances and favoritism. I realised that maybe the real graduation wasn't the ceremony or the cap and gown, it was learning to face your family honestly, no matter how messy it gets. And for now, that felt like the most important lesson of all. Months passed and the tension in the house finally started to ease. The air wasn't completely clear, old wounds don't vanish overnight, but we were learning how to coexist without every moment exploding into chaos. Dad was still awkward, still fumbling with words, but he genuinely tried. He'd check in, offer advice when asked, and, most importantly, stop comparing us or favouring Mark openly. He even apologised again one evening after dinner, this time quietly, not as a confession, but as a recognition of his past mistakes. Mom, too, had shifted. She stopped being the silent critic who held grudges and started listening more. She still rolled her eyes at Dad's clumsy attempts at bonding, but there was a softness there I hadn't seen in years. It felt like she was letting go of some of her own anger, which helped the rest of us breathe easier. Emily had become my ally in a weird, unexpected way. She teased me relentlessly, of course, but there was a newfound respect. She'd joke, you survived Dad's secret revelation, you're basically a legend now, and we'd laugh, even though the memory of that day still stung. Mark, surprisingly, became the quiet stabilizer. He'd stop me from getting too caught up in old resentment and remind me, gently, that people can change even if slowly. I can't fix what he did, he said one afternoon, but I can help make sure it doesn't keep hurting you. That alone felt like a small victory. I started to see Dad in a new light, not perfect, not flawless, but human. He was trying to reconcile decades of mistakes and favoritism, and even though some days were rough, I appreciated that he wanted to repair the relationship rather than just sweep it under the rug. One weekend, we all gathered again, Mom, Dad, Mark, Emily, and me for a casual family dinner. No party, no celebration, just food and conversation. And for the first time in years, I felt like we were actually present with each other, not playing roles or hiding behind resentments. Dad looked at me and quietly said, I know I can't undo the past, but I want the future to be better. I'm proud of you not because of anything else, but because of who you are. I nodded, my throat tight. Thanks, Dad. I'm proud of myself too, and I want to try to rebuild this family, even if it takes a long time. He smiled faintly, a real smile that didn't carry guilt or tension. And that's all I ask. It wasn't a perfect ending. Some scars remain, and I doubt they'll ever completely fade. But the most important thing is that we're talking. We're acknowledging the mistakes, the favoritism, and the hurt. And slowly, painfully, we're learning how to navigate life as a family with honesty, even when it's messy. I guess the lesson here is that families aren't always neat, happy, or perfect. Sometimes the people you love most can hurt you in ways you never imagined. But even then, it's possible to find a path forward if everyone is willing to try. And as for my graduation day, I'll never forget it. Not for the cap and gown, not for the speeches, but for the truth that finally came out and the chance to start healing, even when it felt impossible.